work that's based on part of my PhD. My supervisors there, Dermot and Suzanne, both at the University of Auckland, so credit to them as well for their assistance. If I can see where I'm looking. Great, thank you. And just to follow up, I wanted to say, having seen some of the pictures of the babies that they have in Greece, this is a mosaic of Hercules slaying the snakes that were sent to his crib. I thought I'd just clarify, we're talking about average babies, not Greek babies. Okay, so as I said, it's part of my PhD, which is looking at the impact of BIM on roles and relationships within the industry, or that's what it started out being, at least. So I was proposing to do BIM case studies to see what happened in practice, to see over the course of a project how things evolved, what changed around the BIM documentation, around the observation of how people work together with the model, with the documentation, and with one another within the BIM project. So it was about document review, observation in project meetings, interviews with key participants. So this is the best laid plans part of it, which didn't actually happen because I couldn't find people who were prepared to open up their BIM processes to scrutiny. I had a whole lot of practitioners who said, yeah, that's a really great idea, we'd love to read a case study about that, but not on our project. We're not really ready to have you look at what we're doing with BIM. So then I came up with two case studies which were both identified as trial cases, projects where the client and the practitioners were saying they weren't doing BIM, they were just going to take a few steps. They were going to start the process, to find their way. And so they were happy for me to have a look. Except when it came down to it, the clients said, actually, we're not comfortable with this, pulled the rug out from under me and didn't give me access to project meetings, didn't give me access to documentation. It all came back to interviews with key participants. So it's no longer the centre of my PhD, it's more like a footnote, but I'm still kind of reluctant to give it up. So this is what I've found in this part of the project. So these are the people that I have done interviews with on two projects. They're both educational facilities of quite different scales, quite different scale of building, quite different importance to the different institutes, and quite different project teams. So project one is a large project for New Zealand, large companies involved in the process. Project two is much more your SME projects, companies, and a much smaller scale of project. So just take a step back and just to think about, I'm talking about walking the BIM talk. So thinking about what the talk is that people are coming to. A lot of the talk is around those big companies, and as Stephen said, in reality, what we see in reality is a lot different from what we see in the research papers in the lab situation. And so a lot of what's coming through are these big projects, these case studies are the top level, the high performers, the grand projects that have a lot riding on them that doesn't necessarily translate quite so well into practice. And a quote there, that those with the most resources get more. So to those who have, more is given, the Matthew effect. And there's a fear that may be what's going on, that those smaller companies don't have quite the same access to it. And so from that comes the issues of hype, and everybody I'm sure has heard the BIM wash and the BIM hype and all of this information, that a lot of the smaller companies or the slow adopters are really worried that BIM hype is just hype, that they're going to get stung if they get into it, that it's only really suitable for those companies who have the real strong BIM support from particular government agencies or from particular specialists who are prepared to go into it and monitor it in great detail. And if companies are trying to do it on their own as part of work as usual, that none of that will be accessible to them. It won't be the same process for them. And where companies do start trying to take some steps, often there's frustration because they don't see that those gains are taking place. Okay. And so more Greek mythology. Lennon, Sanchez and Hansen, they say many governments are of the view that with a higher implementation of BIM, the sky is the limit. And so a lot of the companies are worried that the presentation is that the sky is the limit, but They also know what happened to Icarus when he flew too close to the sun. Not quite crash and burn. Burned and crashed, maybe. Not a successful outcome. So what I was looking at, two projects rather, that were trying to walk the talk, that recognised that they felt that they didn't do BIM. They wanted to give it a try. They were working towards a BIM outcome. They saw BIM as an aspirational goal that they wanted to achieve. Some of the participants had experience with BIM in-house in minor implementations, but both project teams hadn't worked on full exchange, hadn't worked on the more extensive use of BIM that they wanted to attempt within these projects. Interestingly, the talk that came from the different people in this process was quite different. The clients thought that these projects were BIM projects because they had said that they should be. In project one, so the big project, the FM team in that instance didn't want BIM for FM, but they wanted the security of the duration and the cost information pinned down early, and so they saw BIM as a way of achieving that. And so they had said to the project team, this is going to be our BIM project. We're going to see what we can achieve with BIM. At project two, the FM team again had come in and said we want a BIM project, but this time so that they could achieve some inputs into their FM processes and requested from the teams that took place. And so a quote from one of the FM managers there, a number of things that they wanted to get from the BIM process, from project two in this case, that they could put into their systems, their information. The designers, on the other hand, were saying, we're doing BIM because we decided it should be BIM. The clients don't really know what BIM is, and if we had told them that it's not going to be BIM, then it wouldn't be BIM. So their perspective, the clients are naive. You don't do BIM just because a client tells you to or asks you to. You do BIM because you want to do it as the architect to improve your design processes. And they believe that a lot of the potential uses and advantages that could have come from BIM that they had seen in the documentation, in the reporting, and in the presentation of BIM material that they had seen previously, that those were blocked effectively because the client was so narrow. So on one hand, they're saying we're not doing BIM because the client wants it, but at the same time, they're saying that we can't do BIM properly because the client doesn't want it. So they're trying to look at it in both cases. And then when we move into the construction team, they're saying the architects aren't really doing BIM either. The clients don't know what they want from BIM. We're doing BIM because we think BIM is important. So it's still operating in a very siloed mentality, even though they were going into it with the aim of a social implementation. The constructors were saying the architectural models were poor quality, although they were quite impressed with the structural and services models that were coming to them. So the designers were at different levels. And one of the problems, one of the problems they found was that the architects were taking the lead in terms of information management in the projects. And because of the architects' focus on design, their organisation and management of the model processes was quite limited, and one of the problems on the projects. And the contractors also identified that they didn't get as much out of BIM as they would have liked to because they were so late coming in on the process. So the stumbling blocks, some of the key issues that came up as a result. Number one, for everybody across the board, including the FM teams, was a lack of skilled staff. So one of the reasons why the FM people were saying they didn't want information from BIM into their FM processes was because they didn't have people who could deal with it, who could manage the models and access the information, keep it up to date, that sort of thing. So teams were relying on third-party modelers, particularly the contractors, the construction teams, but also one of the architectural teams was outsourcing some of the model creation to third parties, either in New Zealand, or in one case an outfit in Vietnam who were delivering. And a quote from one of the construction managers was that they were being held to ransom. Really, they didn't have the skills or the ability to do it themselves, but the companies that they were outsourcing to didn't have the skills, didn't have the knowledge of either the New Zealand market or of the construction industry. So they were from an architectural perspective rather than a construction perspective in some cases. And so they were being held to ransom by these people that they were going to for the information. The emphasis on BIM technology came through as well. So they were saying that because the technology is the easy fix, is the thing that people can get their head around the easiest, it's also where a lot of the people in the process put most of their time. And so people got very hung up on getting the BIM model perfect in some particular little respect, on getting their families completely lined up and updated and in position, all of those sort of things. So a lot of time spent on trivia, essentially, within the model, rather than on the people and the process side of things, so the project outcomes and the relationships within the team. And they also identified the expectation from various people within the project partnerships that there was this expectation that because they'd said it was going to be a BIM project, that everything was going to be hallelujah, let's celebrate, everything's great. So the idea that BIM is the magic wand that they can just wave and suddenly everything is all right and easy. Okay, so following from that, some of the key conclusions that came through, that despite the difference in scale and the difference in the size of the project teams on these two case study projects, the outcomes, the processes and the effects of the projects were very, very similar. The processes that they went through, the things that they came up against as the problems were very, very straightforward in that regard, not dependent on those factors. One point that came out, and I noted on one of the poster presentations yesterday evening that came through as well, that a lot of the people who I was interviewing did not identify themselves as BIM users. They didn't consider themselves as BIM experts. They were using BIM because that was kind of what they had to do, but they really didn't think that they would be BIM people. But a lot of their colleagues pointed to them as the BIM champion or the BIM specialist within their organisation. So again, there was a mismatch in how they perceived themselves and how others perceived them in relation with BIM. And as Raphael pointed out with the question in the previous session, a lot of the challenges are not specific to BIM. They're challenges that come up in projects everywhere around project expectations, around communicating responsibilities and processes that happen regardless. So getting the processes right is still fundamental whether you're using BIM or not. That magic wand doesn't actually exist. So the teams were very realistic that they were doing BIM kind of. They didn't think that they had it right, but they thought that they were achieving things nonetheless, and that it would be a cumulative improvement, that the next project that they go on and the one after that, they'll improve stepwise. So it's not an automatic win, but there are enough gains along the way to make it worthwhile. And finally, back to Crete, taking the bull by the horns with the bull dump is a pretty risky business. But they were saying that BIM's not all or nothing. So maybe it's using the momentum of the tools as the bull leapers use the momentum of the bull to improve their processes, to make their gains, and somewhat more incrementally than the bull leapers and the mosaics. Thank you.
Thank you.